The news broke like a thunderclap across Hollywood. On September 16, 2025, Robert Redford, the Sundance Kid, the golden boy of American cinema, and one of the last true lions of the silver screen, passed away at his home in Utah at the age of 89. Tributes began flooding in from every corner of the world. Meryl Streep, his co-star in Out of Africa, called him one of the lions. Directors, actors, high-profilers, all united in grief for a man whose influence stretched far beyond Hollywood. But perhaps no tribute cut deeper than the one shared by Barbra Streisand, the woman who knew him better than most. Their on-screen romance in The Way We Were became one of cinema's most unforgettable love stories, and their real-life friendship endured for more than 50 years. Streisand posted a photo from the film with a simple, devastating caption, "Goodbye, my dear Bob. We made something that will last longer than many real marriages." That single line captured what millions were already feeling, that Robert Redford's legacy isn't just in the films he made, but in the timeless emotions he inspired. Tonight, we're looking back at his incredible journey, from the heartthrob who became a Hollywood heavyweight, to the visionary who changed the course of independent filmmaking, to the man whose friendships, especially with Streisand, revealed a depth far beyond his famous blue eyes. Because Robert Redford wasn't just a star. He was an artist, a pioneer, and a reminder that true beauty always lies beneath the surface. The phone calls started before sunrise. Industry insiders were whispering what no one wanted to believe. By the time dawn broke over Los Angeles, the headlines were everywhere. Robert Redford gone at 89. He passed away at his home in Sundance, Utah, the very mountains he had turned into a sanctuary for artists. Surrounded by family, far away from the bright lights of Hollywood, he slipped quietly into history. But the world didn't take it quietly. The reaction was instant, raw, and overwhelming. Actors who grew up idolizing him described him as a lion. Directors who owed their entire careers to him wept openly. High-profilers who usually couldn't agree on anything paused to honor him. Even Stephen King, the master of horror, admitted he was stunned, tweeting that it was hard to believe Redford was gone. For a moment, Hollywood's competitive, cutthroat energy disappeared. Everyone was united in grief. Because Robert Redford wasn't just another movie star. He was a cultural force. He was the blonde-haired rebel who proved beauty could have depth, the Oscar-winning director who turned his back on Hollywood's machine to support independent voices, and the activist who refused to stop speaking out, even when it wasn't popular. And yet, while the tributes from legends like Meryl Streep and Ron Howard were powerful, one voice cut through the noise louder than all the rest. A voice that had been tied to his for more than 50 years. A voice that revealed the heart behind the icon, Barbra Streisand. Her words, her memories, her grief, they told the story of Robert Redford in a way no one else could. Because their connection wasn't just about one movie. It was about a friendship, a bond, a love story that never really ended. But to understand why her tribute left Hollywood in tears, we need to go back. Back to 1973. Back to a film that nearly didn't happen. Back to the moment Robert Redford and Barbra Streisand created one of cinema's most enduring love stories. When the news broke, the first responses came fast. Meryl Streep, his co-star in Out of Africa, wrote, "One of the lions has passed. Rest in peace, my lovely friend." Coming from Streep, who rarely uses such sweeping words, that tribute carried weight. She wasn't just saying goodbye to a colleague. She was mourning the end of an era. But it was Barbra Streisand's reaction that left people shaken. Her tribute wasn't just professional, it was personal. She didn't speak like someone mourning a co-star. She spoke like someone losing a piece of herself. Their story goes back to The Way We Were, the 1973 classic that paired Streisand's fiery, vulnerable Katie with Redford's cool, distant Hubble. On screen, their chemistry was electric, unforgettable. Off-screen, their bond grew into a friendship that lasted half a century. Streisand fought for him to take that role when others doubted he was right for it. She saw more than a pretty face. She saw the depth, the vulnerability, the real man underneath the golden image. And she was right. His performance became iconic, and the film turned into a love story for the ages. Over the years, she never stopped honoring him. On his 85th birthday, she posted a throwback photo with a note that simply read, "Dear Bob, happy birthday. It was great talking to you the other day." That one line revealed everything. They weren't just old co-stars. They were still in touch, still part of each other's lives. At an awards ceremony in 2015, she presented him with a Lifetime Achievement honor and said, "You never quite know what he's really thinking. That makes him fascinating to watch on screen. Bob understands the power of restraint." Then, with a twinkle in her eye, she added, "It was fun being married to you for a while. Too bad it didn't work out." The crowd laughed, but behind the humor was something real, something tender, something that lasted decades. So when the world learned Redford is no more, Streisand's grief felt different. It wasn't about the icon or even the actor. It was about the man. And it reminded us all that behind every Hollywood legend is a human being, flawed, private, and deeply loved. But here's the twist. Robert Redford almost never played Hubble. In fact, he tried to turn the role down, and that decision could have changed film history forever. It's hard to believe now, but Robert Redford almost walked away from The Way We Were. Barbra Streisand had her heart set on him for the role of Hubble, the handsome, privileged writer whose charm masked a quiet insecurity. For her, there was no one else who could bring that character to life. But Redford didn't see it that way. He thought the script painted Hubble as too perfect, too shallow, just a symbol for Streisand's fiery character to fall for. And Redford never wanted to be just a symbol. Think about that for a second. At the height of his beauty, when women around the world had posters of him on their walls, when Hollywood would have given him any romantic lead, Redford was worried about being one-dimensional. He wanted flaws. He wanted vulnerability. He wanted the character to feel real. And that's what made him different. Most actors in his position would have said yes without hesitation. But Redford wasn't most actors. He demanded depth, and that demand almost stopped the film before it began. Streisand, though, refused to give up. She pushed, she pleaded, and she convinced the studio that Redford was worth the fight. And eventually he agreed, on one condition: the script had to be rewritten to give Hubble layers, to make him more than just the golden boy stereotype. That decision changed everything, because once the cameras rolled, the chemistry between Streisand and Redford was undeniable. She was fiery, intense, and vulnerable. He was calm, reserved, and quietly fragile. Together, they created something rare, a romance that felt real. Audiences didn't just watch Katie and Hubble fall in love, they believed it, they lived it. The film exploded into a cultural phenomenon. The music, the performances, that unforgettable final scene outside the Plaza Hotel, it all became etched into movie history. And at the center of it was the spark between Barbra and Bob, two people from opposite worlds who somehow fit together perfectly, if only for a moment in time. But what fans didn't see was the connection forming off-screen. Between takes, they weren't just co-stars. They were two artists who understood each other, two people who shared a sensitivity, a shyness, a need for authenticity in a world that often demanded masks. Streisand later said, "On the surface, we were very different, but inside, we were alike, sensitive, shy, always searching for meaning." That bond never faded. Even after the cameras stopped, even after decades passed, The Way We Were wasn't just a film they made together. It was a thread that tied them to each other forever. And decades later, the proof of that bond was everywhere, in the way they spoke about each other, in the tributes they shared, in the quiet, private friendship that lasted more than 50 years. But what makes their story so remarkable isn't just the movie they made. It's the fact that long after the credits rolled, they remained a part of each other's lives. And the world got glimpses of that bond in the most unexpected moments. In Hollywood, relationships come and go like the changing of seasons. Co-stars become strangers the moment filming wraps. Friendships fade when the spotlight shifts. But Robert Redford and Barbra Streisand were different. Their connection wasn't fleeting. It was enduring, quiet, real. In 2015, more than 4 decades after The Way We Were, Streisand stood on stage to honor Redford at a Lifetime Achievement ceremony. She smiled, remembering their time together, and said, "You never quite know what he's really thinking. That's what makes him fascinating. Bob understands the power of restraint." Then, with perfect timing, she added, "It was fun being married to you for a while. Too bad it didn't work out." The audience roared with laughter. But behind the humor was a tenderness that couldn't be faked. It was the kind of joke only someone with a deep personal bond could make. That wasn't the only time she honored him. On his 85th birthday, Streisand posted a simple message on Instagram. "Dear Bob, happy birthday. It was great talking to you the other day." Just one sentence, but that sentence said everything. They weren't just old co-stars exchanging polite words. They were still talking, still checking in, still friends 50 years later. And Redford wasn't shy about returning the sentiment. In interviews, he spoke warmly about her spirit, her energy, her determination. He joked about how much fun it was to tease her on set, how she brought out a playful side of him few people ever saw. That's the kind of intimacy that doesn't come from Hollywood publicity tours. That's the kind of intimacy that lasts a lifetime. It's rare in Hollywood to see two stars maintain that kind of connection without drama, without scandals, without the bitterness that so often follows. But their friendship endured because it was built on respect. They didn't compete. They didn't overshadow. They lifted each other up. And when Redford passed in 2025, Streisand's grief told the world just how deep that connection went. Her tribute wasn't polished or performative. It wasn't a PR statement. It was raw, emotional, and deeply personal. She didn't just lose a colleague. She lost a confidant, a partner in art, a friend who had been with her through nearly every stage of her life. That's what made her words stand out among the countless tributes from Hollywood royalty. Everyone admired Robert Redford. Everyone respected him. But Barbra Streisand loved him in a way no one else did. And she wasn't afraid to show it. But as powerful as their bond was, Robert Redford's story isn't defined by one relationship, or even by his own acting career. Because the moment he stepped behind the camera, he changed Hollywood forever. And what he built outside the spotlight would become his greatest legacy. Robert Redford could have coasted on his looks and his fame forever. He could have spent decades cashing checks, playing the same handsome lead over and over again. But that wasn't who he was. Redford wanted more. He wanted meaning. And in 1981, he made a move that would reshape cinema forever. That year, fresh off winning the Oscar for directing Ordinary People, Redford took a risk. He poured his energy and resources into creating something Hollywood didn't think it needed, a festival for independent filmmakers. He called it the Sundance Institute, named after one of his most iconic roles, the Sundance Kid. At the time, the industry was dominated by studios, big budgets, and familiar faces. Unknown filmmakers didn't stand a chance. If you weren't backed by a major studio, your voice went unheard. But Redford saw something different. He saw stories waiting to be told, artists waiting to be discovered, and voices the mainstream refused to amplify. And with Sundance, he gave them a stage. The results were explosive. A few years later, films from Sundance were changing the cultural landscape. Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs, Darren Aronofsky's Pi, Paul Thomas Anderson's Hard Eight. These weren't just movies, they were the birth of careers that would define modern cinema. Think about that. Tarantino, Anderson, Aronofsky, Soderbergh, some of the most influential directors of our time, might never have been discovered without Robert Redford's vision. And Redford didn't do it for the money or the fame. He did it because he believed in independence. In 2018, he told the Associated Press, "For me, the word to be underscored is independence. I always believed in that word. Giving artists a chance to be heard, that's what Sundance is about." That single belief became a revolution. The Sundance Film Festival grew from a small gathering in Utah to one of the most important cultural events in the world. It became the place where bold new ideas found an audience, where risk-takers could become legends, and where Hollywood was forced to pay attention to the outsiders. But Sundance wasn't just about launching careers. It was about Redford's philosophy of using fame for something bigger than yourself. While other stars were busy building their legacies on screen, Redford was quietly building an empire that belonged to the storytellers of tomorrow. And yet, even while he was changing the industry, Redford was dealing with heartbreak that most people never knew about. Because behind the public triumphs, his private life was marked by unimaginable loss. For all of Redford's success, his life wasn't untouched by tragedy. In fact, some of his deepest scars came from places no parent should ever have to endure. In 1959, his first son, Scott, didn't survive birth at just a few months old. It was the kind of loss that leaves a mark you never fully recover from. Redford rarely spoke about it publicly, but those close to him said it haunted him for the rest of his life. Then, decades later, in 2020, tragedy struck again. His third child, James Redford, known as Jamie, lost his battle with cancer at the age of 58. Jamie wasn't just Robert's son. He was his creative partner, a documentary filmmaker and philanthropist who carried his father's passion for storytelling and activism. Together, they had worked on projects about the environment, education, and health. Losing Jamie wasn't just losing a child. It was losing a collaborator, a friend, a mirror of himself. Think about that. Two of his 4 children gone before him. For most people, that kind of grief could break them. But Redford carried it differently. He didn't hide it, but he didn't let it define him either. He turned his pain into purpose. He poured his energy back into activism, into Sundance, into creating opportunities for others. Friends said his resilience came from a belief that art and storytelling could heal, that by helping others share their voices, he could make sense of his own losses. That resilience showed up on screen too. Even in films like All Is Lost, where he played a man stranded alone at sea, you could see it. A man fighting against impossible odds, refusing to give in, surviving through sheer willpower. That wasn't just acting. That was Redford's spirit, shaped by a lifetime of love and loss. And maybe that's why fans connected to him so deeply. Yes, he was impossibly handsome. Yes, he was a star. But underneath the glamour, there was a man who had suffered, who had endured heartbreak, who kept going even when the weight of life seemed unbearable. That quiet strength made him more than an icon. It made him human. And even in his later years, that strength carried him into one final chapter. A chapter that proved he was never interested in slowing down, even as the years caught up with him. By the time Robert Redford reached his 80s, most actors would have retired comfortably, content to live off their past glories. But Redford never believed in retirement. He once said, "Retirement means quitting something, and why quit when there's still life to live?" And true to his word, he kept going. In 2017, he reunited with his old co-star Jane Fonda for Our Souls at Night, a quiet Netflix drama about 2 lonely widowers finding connection in their later years. The chemistry between them, after decades of friendship, reminded fans of the magic that happens when 2 legends share the screen. The following year, he starred in The Old Man and the Gun, a film he said would be his last. At 82 years old, Redford played a career criminal who couldn't stop robbing banks simply because it gave him joy. Critics called it a perfect farewell role, charming, mischievous, and filled with the same twinkle that made him famous decades earlier. But even as he spoke about retirement, it was clear Redford never really meant to stop. For him, stepping away from acting didn't mean stepping away from life. He kept giving interviews, kept championing environmental causes, and kept guiding the future of Sundance. In 2025, just months before his passing, he issued a statement about the festival relocating to Boulder, Colorado. His words captured who he was to the very end. "Change is inevitable. We must always evolve and grow. That's been at the core of our survival." Even in his late 80s, Redford wasn't looking back. He was looking forward, always searching for growth, always pushing toward the next challenge. That philosophy was part of what drew Barbra Streisand to him in the first place. His refusal to settle, his hunger for depth, and it was what fans admired most. He wasn't just the pretty face who coasted through a career. He was the restless artist who believed life had to be lived every single day until the very end. But while his final years showed resilience and vision, they also set the stage for something Hollywood hasn't seen in decades, a farewell unlike any other. Now, the industry is bracing for a memorial that will stop Hollywood in its tracks. Think about it. Every actor he worked with, every director he inspired, every filmmaker whose career began at Sundance, they'll all be there. From Jane Fonda to Meryl Streep, from Quentin Tarantino to Steven Soderbergh, it's going to be a gathering unlike any other. And at the heart of it, one figure will stand out: Barbra Streisand, the woman who fought for him, who believed in him, who honored him for decades, and who never stopped calling him Bob. There's no way she won't be there to say goodbye. Because in many ways, Streisand's tributes over the years already told us what Redford's real legacy was. It wasn't just his films. It wasn't just Sundance. It wasn't even the awards or the box office numbers. It was his humanity, his restraint, his depth, his ability to connect, to elevate the people around him rather than outshine them. When Rosie O'Donnell posted a tribute, she didn't just share any photo. She chose one of Redford and Streisand from The Way We Were, adding the caption, "We will never be the same. Good night, Bob." What a legacy. Even after he's gone, the image of the two of them together said more than words ever could. The truth is, Robert Redford changed the DNA of Hollywood. He wasn't the flashiest, he wasn't the loudest, but he built a career, and a legacy on authenticity. Whether it was choosing roles with meaning, directing films that asked hard questions, or creating platforms for outsiders, Redford always believed in the power of stories, and that belief will outlast him. Robert Redford's life wasn't uncomplicated. It was filled with triumph and loss, joy and grief, victories and heartbreaks. He was a movie star who didn't trust stardom, a golden boy who craved depth, a Hollywood icon who used his fame to give others a chance. Barbra Streisand once said of their work together, "We made something that will last much longer than many real marriages." And she was right. 50 years after The Way We Were first hit theaters, audiences still cry watching that final scene. 50 years later, they still believe in the love story they created. That's the essence of Redford's legacy. He gave us films that made us feel. He gave us a festival that gave voice to the unheard. He gave us proof that beauty with substance can change the world. And now, as Hollywood prepares to say goodbye, his influence will ripple through generations. Because Robert Redford wasn't just the Sundance Kid. He wasn't just Hubble. He wasn't just the man with a $1,000,000 smile. He was proof that even in an industry obsessed with glamour, depth still matters. And that's why his story, complicated, beautiful, and unforgettable, will be told for decades to come. So what do you think? What was Robert Redford's greatest gift to cinema? His performances, his directing, or the legacy of Sundance? Let me know in the comments. And if you're like me, maybe it's time to revisit The Way We Were one more time and remember the man who turned a love story into something eternal.